We're live.
We're live.
Good evening, I'm Matt Ruth with Thomas P. Miller Associates, and we've been working with the county and the foundation to review sort of the evaluate the foundation, some of its operations, its focus, and some of its issues as it's looking to the forward. With Larry retiring, probably it's a good time to do some thinking. So we've got a lot to go through in terms of the presentation. We're going to be looking at existing conditions, looking at targeted industries, a little bit of literature research, and then really we'll be focusing on the recommendations. And I think that's probably the most important thing. To think of the recommendations is sort of for your consideration. These aren't cast in stone or come down on high. We've been doing interviews, we've met with folks, and we reviewed a lot of the documents that Larry provided and some others provided to try to provide a kind of a comprehensive overview of the foundation and its work and its focus. The last thing that after today, everything's kind of a draft stage still, so it's all open for comment. That's what we simply hope to get some feedback again, especially on the recommendations at the end. But we'll be then taking some of those comments and trying to revise them to provide a little bit of an implementation plan or kind of a workflow for the foundation to think about with the recommendations as a way of kind of, with Larry's transition, how we move forward with some timing on some of the things we may be recommending tonight. So to give you sort of hopefully a bit of a game plan looking forward for 2020, but certainly for 2021. I'd like to introduce Jack Woods. Jack with Thomas P. Miller has been the main point of contact on the project and has really done the bulk of the work working with the foundation and the county commission, the steering committee that we've had. Also like to introduce Gabe McFadden. He's one of our key researchers, and he'll be going over a lot of the existing conditions and some of the industrial data. So without further ado, we've got a lot to go through, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Jack, and you and Gabe, and I'll pop up with your recommendation.
Thanks, Matt. So yeah, we have a 50-slide PowerPoint to run through with everyone. We want to keep the first section fairly brief, and as Matt mentioned, it highlights a lot of the existing conditions. So there's socioeconomic trends, and then review quite a few documents countywide to kind of understand the context that the foundation's been operating in. So we'll run through those. Gabe primarily will work through the data section, and then I'll talk through the literature review piece. And then Matt, as you mentioned, getting into those recommendations. So we can jump in here. And Gabe, I'll turn this over to you and add some context as we go through. I hope everybody can see it.
Everyone seems okay? Okay. So this is just a kind of a high-level overview of the population for the county. And as you guys can see, from 2000 to 2025, Stark County has seen a bit of a decline in population, and we see that about 47% of the population is older than 45 years, and you can see the median age is increasing. As you can see, it's increased from 40 to 43, about 15 years, suggesting kind of an aging population in the county. And then further, only about 28% of the population is that 0 to 34 years old range, the young working family. So it's really painting a picture of the county's aging. So as we look at kind of just a brief overview of the housing data, we see about 63% of the people in the county are owners, 17% are renters, and we check out the median home value. Stark County trails a bit behind Indiana and behind the U.S., but has still retained a great amount of affordability in the county in terms of its housing. You see that most households, about 52%, earn between 35 to 99K, so that middle range there on the graph, and then about a third of the residents make less than that 35,000 range. Whereas, like I said, the housing is affordable. About 57% of the homes range between 50 to 150,000, which is pretty significant, and we work in a lot of areas where affordability is more on that scale. Now check out the median home value comparison. So this is just kind of showing it along a longer range of time, and this is Stark County relative to Indiana and then the U.S., whereas Stark County and Indiana have much more affordable housing options compared to national averages, and that's certainly amidst a national shortage of affordable housing, so Stark is in a good position there. Median home values in the county have grown by over 30,000, and that's been since 2003. And then home values in the county, as you guys see, has seen far less volatility than the national averages, as it's been on pace with Indiana and has seen some of the growth, but less of the volatility, which is also a good sign. When you look at educational attainment for the county, about 84% of residents have at least a GED or a high school degree, and Stark County has a higher percentage of residents with associate's degrees than Indiana and the national averages, and that could mean you also have 21.4% of the population with some college and no degree. So there's a good opportunity there for people who have some skills and could be reskilled, and that they have some of that experience, and it's an opportunity to further reskill some of that workforce. So that's a bright spot. And then we wanted to show the progress of the educational attainment in the county. And this has been since 2005 over to 2019, and we've seen the county has seen a pretty significant improvement in attainment over that period of time. As you've seen, there's been a decrease in the number of residents without a high school degree or equivalent, and there has been an increase in associates, bachelor's, and graduate degrees, which are a good thing, as those bring higher incomes and higher positions. So now this is all the private industries in Stark County from the highest level of analysis, which is a 2-digit NAICS code, which is essentially just an industry classification system. And as you can see, the majority of jobs in 2020 in the region are in manufacturing, drop down to retail trade, and then you see third at admin, support, and waste remediation services. That has also seen a huge growth at 1,400% increase in jobs from 2005. It's certainly an industry to pay attention to. Just a high-level overview of the employment characteristics. So when you compare the employment rate Stark County in 2010, so right after the Great Recession, you see that the Stark County is a 3.3 unemployment rate, Indiana is 11, and the United States is at 9.8. So as the recovery starts to happen, Stark County definitely feels that recovery, but still kind of trails behind Indiana and the nation as a whole. And you can see most jobs, about 65% of them, are in the services or the manufacturing industry. And then you have a distant third of the jobs, are about 9.4% in the public admin industry. So the largest occupations by 2020, so this is just by just purely number of jobs, and we categorize this by SOC code, which is another classification system. This is only classification of occupations instead of industry. And you can see that fast food and counter workers have seen about a 56% decrease in jobs, indicating that many fast food restaurants in the county have probably closed in this past decade. Whereas home health and personal care aid jobs have increased by a significant 106%, which could certainly be helpful for the increased aging percentage of the population in the county. So then the top growing occupations, and this is again measured by that occupation classification system. And we see that those are welders, smolders, and brazing workers. Those have increased by over 100%, which is certainly emphasizing the demand for those blue-collar trade workers. And also 3 of the 5 classes taught by skill are included in those top growing occupations. So we have EMT, firefighters, and welders. And the good thing about those is those occupations all have leading median hourly earnings higher than the county average and also higher than growth. When you check out resident wages overview, so this is across all of the occupations within the county, and you compare them to all of them across Indiana and the US. Stark County's residents, if you guys have seen median hourly earnings that have increased from 2005, slightly, as you see a little dip there in 2006, but overall a trend of increase. However, that increased trends still trails Indiana and also the US as well. All right, and I will pass it over to Jack.
Thanks, Dave.
Overview.
So, as I mentioned earlier, we reviewed quite a few documents that were sent over from our steering committee, trying to understand the context that the foundation is operating in addition just to the data side. So I did a pretty extensive literature review. Started by reviewing the contract that the foundation operates under. I think the big part of this was just pulling out kind of what their budget is from year to year, trying to understand that. That was important for us, knowing how that affects the services that they offer and what they're responsible for. So I went through and listed that out. But mostly things that you would associate with an economic development foundation, business retention, attraction efforts, small business development efforts, engaging in land acquisition, and then some placemaking things as well. And also included some measures that we pulled out of the contract in terms of how to evaluate the efficiency of the foundation. So basically promoting activities, initiatives, and planning projects, looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in the community, both in terms of economic development and workforce development. And that ties into tax-based growth and the effectiveness of the abatements or tax incentives that are being offered by the county. And then also small business assistance, again, is another piece to measure the foundation's success. So we also looked at the skill contract that is with the county, because that's another important linkage to the foundation. But again, I'm sure as most of you know, that's a big part of workforce development, workforce training in the county. We'll kind of get into some recommendations around the foundation and skill and kind of how their roles might be able to look going forward, but I do really want to stress that we definitely see that skill as an important organization in the county, something that we think should remain and continue to help serve industries. Took a look at their contract, their goals, and tried to understand those as well, in addition to what the foundation is doing from an economic development side. So Larry also sent to us the 2020 to 2021 plan of action. It was pretty comprehensive, quite a few items on there. I believe almost 39 action items. And they range from a variety of topics, from economic development, workforce development, and then also organizational goals. And they also looked at some potential partnerships between regional, local, and nonprofit organizations. So we thought that was a pretty strong list of things that you're trying to accomplish this year. Another item that we looked at was the stellar plan that was put together. We know that there's been a lot of good momentum behind this, and the foundation did a great job leading this effort and continuing to kind of work to achieve some of these main goals. But basically, it identified some of the challenges in the county in terms of low wages, incomes, and housing prices. I think we saw that in the data that Gabe presented. But the plan is really put together and lays out a foundation for how to address those issues. We're kind of at the beginning of that process, so I think there's still a lot of work to be done there. But the stellar process was definitely good to set the foundation as far as what to do moving forward. So a little bit more on the stellar plan. I just thought it was important to kind of call out some of the goals and objectives. Again, this really ties to placemaking. There's a big piece of that. I think there's a huge opportunity in Stark County to focus on placemaking. I think it would do a lot to address some of the challenges in terms of lower than average educational attainment, housing stock that might be aging a little bit, the need for a more vibrant sense of place. We think if you're able to kind of build that sense of place, it might help to retain some of the younger residents who may be leaving and keep some of that talent and make it easier to attract talent to the Also took a look at the 5-year Parks Master Plan. I think this kind of relates back to this bigger theme that we're seeing in all the planning efforts, which is really good, and that's placemaking. So when we're thinking about these broader themes and kind of where the foundation should be focusing their efforts, placemaking seems like something that they should be spending a significant amount of time on, because it aligns with their priorities and then also the priorities of the county. Parks obviously tie into that, and I think there's some good opportunities to work with the Parks Board moving forward. Infrastructure improvement plans, we reviewed these as well. It looked like initially when they were put together, I think it was in 2015, Stark County ranked 88 out of the 92 counties in the state in terms of deficient bridges and infrastructure. Has seen quite a bit of improvement. The plan was reevaluated in 2017. They've basically improved by half, up to 40 out of 92 counties. And projected in 2021 to be in the top 5 of all counties with no deficient bridges. So infrastructure obviously is big. It ties into economic development, and there's been quite a bit of progress there. Also took a look at the county comp plan, highlighted the key goals here. Economic development is obviously one of those things, and again, I think when we look at all the planning efforts, they all have to have a few broad topics that come together and things that need to be addressed. So retaining population is a big part of that, and being competitive in the economic development and employment opportunity side of things is also big there, and the foundation obviously ties into that. So I took out, or pulled out all the key goals from the county comp plan. Economic development, again, is one of them. Placemaking is one of them. 2 big areas that we think the foundation can continue to do strong work in, as well as housing. We think there's a need there for the foundation maybe to push some of the housing focus and address some of the challenges that we're seeing when it comes to affordability and age there. So have more findings too on the foundation or on the kind of comp plan, but really wanted to dig in on the economic development goals. So build quality of life assets, again, and promote economic development. I think that ties back into placemaking, talent attraction, and then develop a countywide tourism initiative. So that's something to be thinking about moving forward and what the county does around tourism. Capitalize on all the really great recreational assets and assets that are in the county. I think the foundation can continue to play a role there as well. We also looked at comp plans for the communities inside the county. So I took a look at the North Judson comp plan. Again, they place focus on quality of life and economic development. Also took a look at Knox. Very similar goals: strengthen the sense of place, encourage investments, kind of ties back to economic development, and then some other focus categories in terms of resident and visitor attractions, urban design, placemaking is also big there too. And then we looked at the town of Hamline comp plan. And again, the overarching goals are to maintain the small town charm and rural atmosphere, but again, build on the quality of place assets that the county offers, that Hamline offers, and again, an emphasis on economic development. So it was encouraging as we reviewed those plans. It seems like everyone is on the same page as far as what the county needs. And the foundation obviously kind of can play a role in bringing a lot of those priorities together, and I think there's opportunities to work together to achieve these visions. This takes us into phase 2 of our PowerPoint. We wanted to take a look at maybe some opportunities around targeted industries that could be places that the foundation could focus attraction efforts on moving forward. Thought that was important to lay out. So I'm going to turn this back over to Gabe here in a second. But Larry provided us with a study that was completed on some target clusters from 2010 to 2016. We kind of took a look at that as a baseline and then tried to build off of that and maybe give a little bit of an update to it moving forward as my views on where business attraction efforts should be focused. Yeah, Gabe, you want to get in and kind of explain what you started?
Sure.
Thanks for it.
So based on our target industry analysis, we put some stars up here just to show where they align kind of through our analysis and then the prior study here. And we found some parallels in agribusiness, chemicals, of course, manufacturing, logistics, transportation, and then glass and ceramics as well. So our targeted industry analysis, our methodology, the region of analysis, the northwest and north central regions, so all those counties you guys are familiar with there. And we consider regional, local, and national data all within this analysis. So that's, jobs, earnings, total sales, all of those metrics up there. And how we did that, we then took what we felt was important to the county, and we weighted those metrics there. So jobs, job growth, earnings, location quotient, which is how concentrated the industry is, demand, and then growth. And we put some extra weight on annual earnings because we know that is a priority of the county. So through that analysis, we found our top 10 clusters. So 1 through 10, fertilizers, trailers and motorhomes, and then local professional services. You can see, and goes all the way to wholesale farm products to trucking. So the first cluster is composed of those two industries there, and we felt that this was one of the more attractive industries in that these two industries here have seen job growth. They have very sustainable wages. As you can see, the fertilizer mixing only is already particularly concentrated in this region, as 1 is the average, so you can see that it's far above the U.S. Average for concentration, and it's seen good growth. So this is something that we felt was a bright spot for industry attraction. And second, we have trailers and motorhomes here, which is along the same lines. This is, as you can see, the 210 and 117 on the location quotients for manufacturing of motorhomes and travel trailers show this is very concentrated within this region. That's probably from Elkhart, but that also presents some opportunities within the whole region of analysis as well, based upon this job growth and also the sustainable wages as well. Local professional services, as you can see, kind of fits the gamut of all sorts of different admin things you could do. This has seen some growth and then also some declines depending upon the industry. And you can see a lot of these are far less concentrated in the region of analysis than the average U.S. Metric. Recreational and decorative goods. This was another industry that aligned with the prior study you guys had and what we found. You can see there's a bit of job decreases in, so music instrument manufacturing and blind and shade. However, the average earnings are still far above the county median. Then you have 2 industries that are also concentrated in the region already as well. So still providing some opportunity there for more industry attraction. So healthcare provider offices, this is a big segment. You can see there's quite a few industries within this cluster. But we felt one of the big ones here is the offices of mental health practitioners. You can see there's a growth of about over 220 jobs, has a stable wage of about 41,000, and this is also a request for the hospital. So ground transportation support, you see rail transportation at the top there with the most jobs, with the biggest increase in jobs for this whole cluster, and has a pretty healthy average earnings at about 84,000. And it's also far more concentrated in the United States as well. So this is another one that we like in terms of industry attraction efforts for this region.
One thing that I'll add on that, Gabe, there is a lot of rail infrastructure already in the county that this could build off of, so we think there's a good opportunity because of that as well.
Agriculture services, so this is safe as well. We got some declining 5-year period, some increasing. We like this cluster, but we thought that we still like the synthetic chemicals in rail more. However, this industry still has a lot of opportunity, and especially with its earnings per job being sustainable, and also its current concentration within the region. Building equipment distribution along the same lines. We've seen growth that has a good amount of earnings, and as As you can see, at least the top industry, plumbing and heating, is concentrated in the region. Same deal for home sale, farm products and supplies. Trucking, so this kind of fits in with the logistics cluster that we found, and that also aligned with the prior study. So we do think there's some opportunity here, although it has seen a decline in jobs, but the average earnings are still increasing. It's still particularly concentrated within the region. So we think that the logistics is certainly an opportunity. So I just threw a lot of data at you. Key takeaways from all that, the fertilizer industry, kind of as I alluded to, is attractive in that it has higher wages, it's seen strong growth, and has a strong existing presence within this region, as there's over 110 jobs within that particular industry. Trailers and motorhomes manufacturing has a strong concentration in the region, like I said, likely driven by the Elkhart region, but it certainly presents an opportunity to kind of capitalize on some of that spillover for the surrounding region analysis. Healthcare provider offices has about over 25,000 jobs in the region. Growth, has seen growth in Stark County, and also this offers sustainable wages as well. And then so the final one is just reiterating that our analysis aligns with the prior study in some instances. And again, that's specialized manufacturing, so RV, trailer, agribusiness, so the chemicals are referred to, and then the home good products as well. All right, well, I will hand it over to Matt, who will get started with the recommendations.
Yeah.
All right, well, we kind of got through the bulk, and so we kind of want these are really the kind of key issues to share with you tonight, and kind of get your feedback, and think of it as food for thought, guidance, and we'll go from there. So, summary of findings, the foundation has done a really good job of sort of what I would kind of call traditional economic development with business retention and expansion. Some of the industrial development has been very solid, and should be commended for that. It does a little bit more outside of what we would call kind of a traditional economic development framework, and we'll get into that when we talk about skill and workforce. The workforce development side and those ideas and how that fits with the foundation of the tradition of an economic development organization. Sometimes you're going through it, it can be kind of confusing when you're trying to look at kind of key issues and functions. Challenges with a large board. We've got some recommendations in here about maybe trying to create a little more manageable size board. Some ideas on how to possibly do that over time. And communication, just continuing to improve and coordinate communication between county entities, municipal entities. I think that's been something that's been working, but you know, it always takes the effort to continue to keep those lines of communication open. We have some budgetary constraints, and so we're working with a budget that right now has about a $50,000 deficit. So we're very cognizant of that as we're looking at some of these recommendations and how to keep the key functions of the foundation moving forward. The board is large. Sometimes it's hard to get a quorum, as I understand, like we were talking. So there may be some ways to kind of tweak the structure of the board to allow business to function a little more effectively and keep folks engaged overall. The other thing we may discuss is make sure the board has representation kind of across functionalities in the economic development areas, so that you have utilities represented. Even if they don't live inside Stark County, it's important to have some of your utilities, power in particular, maybe coming from outside in terms of its corporate presence, but they have somebody who has a regional responsibility for economic development. Doesn't mean they can, you know, it's up to you if you want to be a voting member, but you certainly want them engaged. I know Larry does on projects, but to also have them engaged in the functionality of the foundation as you move forward. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. We also want to talk a little bit about the workforce area and then transportation, which has been something that we understand is kind of a couple of big things that can go a little bit beyond the normal scope of economic development group. So the recommendations, we think there are two boards, as we understand, one for skill and then the foundation has its separate board. And sometimes it's confusing as we're looking through the budget, what's going where, and I think as we try to say, I think you can see some of the progress in terms of some of the educational, some of the key occupational areas that skill has targeted certainly are needed to be completed. The collaboration between the foundation and the skill board needs to continue. But we think it would help to keep a focus on economic development for the foundation if skill can kind of spin out and do its own thing, separate from being underneath the foundation. That way there's kind of a clear mission for both boards. In terms of functioning budget as well. It's, I think, very important for you as you look forward and look at operating a budget. We think there may be an opportunity that skill rolls out to potentially reduce staff a little bit. I mean, you only have 3 people now, or we would just keep your executive director and support staff with keep the primary functions of the economic development on attraction and business retention work, which is very good. And then your initiatives on placemaking, working on stellar projects. It doesn't mean you have to be in the lead role. You don't have to be in the driver's seat, but you want to make sure you're in the car. If you understand what I'm saying, it may be driven by the mayor of Knox or placemaking, but it's real important that the foundation can be present, take some leadership with how important placemaking can be for attracting talent and attracting those higher paying skill occupations. They're here working, but you want them to actually stay and live. And so it's a balance, but you don't always have to be the one driving it, but you want to make sure that you're helping support those functions again. That may be key for the city of Knox takes leadership in the city of Knox, but you want to be there and help support. And I know Larry's been doing that, particularly with the stellar work. But that should be kind of ongoing, something to keep thinking about. And continue to promote the collaboration between the county leadership and the foundation. You know, you're in rural communities and in smaller areas, you wear a lot of hats. You on the board wear 3 or 4 hats, probably. You're probably on 1 or 2 other boards. You know, that's just the nature of it. You know, in terms of leadership, you wear a lot of hats. Part of it, you need to. But you want to make sure that communication between the county leadership and the foundation continue, and that you're kind of nurturing your leadership together. And then we want to organize the foundation budget. It's very difficult for us to kind of follow. I think all the things that are worthwhile uses, just kind of how do we make sure we've got kind of line item budgets. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We talked a little bit about board of directors and some ideas on that. Creating some term limits perhaps so that there's some rotation and bringing in some new board members over time. Again, it doesn't have to be done all in 2021 or anything like that, but to start to bring in new blood into that, new folks into it. I can give you a perfect example. I was on a board in Indianapolis for a social service agency on the Near East Side, Westminster Neighborhood Services. And my minister called me in 2006 and said, "Don't you want to serve?" I said, "Oh yeah, that's great. They do all this really good work, food banks and soup kitchens and job training and all those things." I got on in 2006. I didn't get off until 2018. I was on 12 years. In the middle of that 12-year period, though, we reorganized our board to create bylaws that said, you know, you're on for 3 years. You can, if you want to stay on, and you're comfortable with everybody on the board, stay on for another 3 years. But then you have to cycle off the board, and that allows new folks to come in and kind of continue to build the capacity of the board over time. And then the other thing, all the work items are really critical that we saw in the work program that Larry shared with us for 2020. I think what we probably would want to recommend is just to step back, figure out the focus. Again, this has a little bit to do with trying to separate skill and board and functions from the foundation's mission and board. And then to kind of create that focus for you going forward. And again, the key work that's been going on, I want to emphasize the key work that's been going on for business retention expansion is really been very good for a smaller county. So we talked about separating skill out. These are workforce issues that are really important. They've got a key role to play with schools and for workforce preparedness. As we mentioned, those different occupational areas, but that's a big function area. And there's a lot of workforce dollars over here that probably should go into that in probably some separate ways. And on the economic development side, you've got some separate dollars from the state or from Economic Development Administration. The county's had some success getting those in the past. So they're kind of different functionalities, so there are opportunities on budget side too. I think it will just help create a little more focus for the foundation instead of trying to do everything across the board. Focus on some of the key areas. We do really solid work in business retention and expansion, continue that and the attraction efforts. And we think there's an opportunity to create a little bit of budget savings for the foundation that way as well. So we talked about number of staff change. The skill function is a big part of that one program manager, I think, function of Ron. Those functions need to occur, but they can occur in their own lane. That allows the foundation and to focus more on the key economic development areas. That's not to say you don't collaborate, and there's need with industry that you know about, and that you link them in with skills training, but allow some savings and a focus for the foundation. We think somewhere, and I know Larry's getting off, somewhere in that range, 75 to 100 is very reasonable. Doesn't mean you have to go to 100 to get a quality person. You might be able to go less than 75. I don't know. I'm just putting that up as a kind of a holder for you to think about because, you know, Larry's retired. Because we're retired, we wouldn't be probably talking about that. And then maybe an executive assistant. 45,000 may seem like a lot, but there would be a lot expected of the individual that's really the person who's really the support and the day-to-day functionality, because the executive director's job is not to sit in the office all day long. It's to be meeting. It seems a little hot today because we're all COVID, we're all wearing our masks and so on, so it's hard to get out. But it's real critical that the executive director get out, meet with industries, understand the issues, attend the county board meetings, all the things that an executive director does. But you do need to have some key support in terms of intake and understanding the call coming in and how to handle it and how timely and is the call. So it takes a little bit of level of some sophistication. The other thing I want to mention to you, because I know you have a small business arm that I think Ron provides some service. I think it was a certain segment of his work effort. I think some of that can continue on. And I've been talking to some other economic development directors. You can save some money too by contracting those services out. So if you had to have a full-time or even part-time person, you might be able to get the same benefit of services for small businesses, but do it through a contract effort with somebody here within Stark County that's worked with small businesses regularly and so on, because it's not a major component of the effort, but it's an important component. So you want to have it available. You may be able to find some savings there too. You want to talk about this again?
Yeah, I can talk about this.
Okay.
So Matt's touched on this a little bit, probably quite a bit at this point, but we really think it's important for the foundation to have a primary economic development focus. We spoke with every staff member of the foundation as part of this process, and they're doing really valuable work in both economic development and workforce development. But I think it was really apparent that they're spending quite a bit of time on the workforce development side of things. Again, want to reinforce the importance of that. But as an economic development foundation, I think that it is really needed to have a strict focus on that economic development side of things. So not just business retention, expansion, and attraction efforts, but also focusing on that placemaking side of things. Larry's done a good job through seller building foundation for, but if you're able to shift some of that focus that the staff's doing on workforce and focus on the seller side as well, I think that the quality of place and placemaking side can really come up along the attraction and retention efforts. I will note anecdotally, we were speaking with some of the local employers. They spoke very highly of the business retention services that the staff provided, how responsive they were to their needs. So I think that that's going really well. But some of the other things that tie into economic development, especially placemaking, when we're talking about housing, I think that there's an opportunity there to spend a little more time on those efforts if maybe the staff's not spending 30 to 40% of their time on skill. So that's where this comes in, talking about the primary economic development focus. I think I touched on most things. Small business development, we know that's an area that the foundation has been working on. There's been some success there, but again, should be more of a primary function of economic development. So we think it's good, but maybe more opportunities to focus on and spend time there if skill is able to be its own separate entity with its own separate staff. So now I'll turn this one back over to you if you want to kind of talk about potential to streamline the board and some of the bylaws and some of your experiences there.
We touched on this a little bit in my other comments, but board size is a bit cumbersome for the size. And again, there are ways to transition board members, over a number of years to get to a size, maybe 2 or 3 years it's going to take to get to a size board that's a little more manageable. Again, to look at term limits so that you're able to bring in some new folks and new ideas from businesses. I think the other thing, and I'm not saying you don't have this representation, but something as you add new board members in the future, always be cognizant. Do we have the right mix of board members as you go forward, representing the needs of economic development in Stark County? Again, most of the board members are going to come from probably within Stark County, but there are some folks that are going to maybe be regionally based because they're related to the hospital system, they're related to utilities, and you may need them and want them to be involved on the board, even though they're not currently present in Stark County, just because of the regional nature of their work. Let's see. Remote collaboration, I think this is my thing. So, I know you've got probably at least, I think Larry, we talked about that, you've got a pretty good thing going right now where you're located. So this is more a physical effort, but the key is to try to emphasize the importance of collaboration between your major entities, the county government and the cities that you work with.
You want to talk about, Matt, maybe some of the importance of economic development as a team effort as well?
Yeah, I think as Jack was mentioning, we talked about placemaking, we talked a little something that's probably new, it's like housing, really housing. Well, we don't expect the foundation to be the leader on developing housing, but it's a real challenge, as we understood it, talking to some of the stakeholders about, for doctors, for other professionals, where do they live? And what about workforce housing as well? Are they, can they find that kind of quality workforce or entry-level homes in Stark County? I mean, these are issues we're seeing cropping up across the country for retaining quality workers and attracting quality workers. And it's becoming a big enough issue for industry to emphasize it with the Economic Development Foundation or the Economic Development Organization locally. So we're kind of putting it on your radar. It doesn't mean you have to be, again, in the driver's seat on it, but you should be at the table because you understand those needs and understand how they affect industry and economic decision-making within the county. With the housing, placemaking, your core functions, you do a very good job at business retention and expansion programs. For small business, you've got that rolling a little bit. We think it continue if you did it with the executive director, if that fell under them, or you can contract someone that work out. Anything else on that?
Yeah, one other thing that I'll add, and wanted to do a really transparent and honest review. And I think one of the things that we saw and heard about from all sides was that there's been some friction between the county and the foundation in the past. It's important to keep in mind that everybody's on the same team, on the same page. They're all part of Stark County, and that's the goal for everyone is how do you make Stark County a better place to live for residents. Just keeping that in mind moving forward as the county works with the foundation works with the county and other organizations, local communities, that this is a team effort to move Stark County forward and make it a more attractive place for businesses, for residents, but overall that'll really push economic development forward. So just wanted to highlight that, but also need to mention that I don't think it's necessarily the foundation's fault or the county's fault, but just kind of how the dynamics have been, not all the time, but in certain instances.
So we want to help, I think it would help to organize the budget more effectively. It's about 6 to 8 line item major points, and then organize the expenses underneath it. I think that'll be easier for you to follow as a board, and it's just track your. I think all the costs and revenues are all there. It wasn't as easy to follow for us, and I suspect occasionally it might be difficult for you to follow unless you're looking at it, every week. Larry knows it. He knows how things are flowing back and forth, but it's just really important to be transparent. And then you can be transparent with the folks who are funding you, the county or the cities and communities or any industries you may be getting support. You want to make that transparent to them as well.
So one thing that I'll add on this too, I think we're really talking about the format of the budget. Like Matt said, when that's clear, it's easier to communicate to your funders how things are going on. And I think even feedback we got from staff was that in the past, people have said, whether it's auditors or people, treasurers reviewing the budget, that there is an opportunity to improve that formatting. So as we mentioned, the final piece of this is an implementation component, but we want to be able to provide a best practice example from another economic development foundation that the Stark County Foundation kind of follow and make the budget just a little bit more clear for the reader.
Yeah, there's a fellow that I've known, say how many years I've been in that town, about 35 years. Can you believe that, right? Not that long. There's one individual, he's been involved in that kind of development for almost that whole time in Indiana, at least 30 of those years. And every 5 years, his board asks him, can you do a survey of how people are budgeting? Because your budget is your strategic plan, and any of the commissioners know that. I mean, that's how you're focusing your resources, at least your scarce dollar resources. So we're going to get that. We completed it a couple of years ago, but it will give you a little bit of a framework. I mean, it's just for use to kind of look at what does their pie look like, and what do the shares of that pie look like. Again, it doesn't mean you follow it to a T, but it provides some guidance on how others around the state do their work, so that you can figure out your alignment some of this thing. And so we also had, and I think the other reason to kind of separate skill from kind of your core economic development, so the foundation continues to do its thing, it coordinates with skill, but lets skill be over here in its lane, working with schools, doing the kind of training that it does, which is pretty impressive. But it was very hard in the budget to figure out at times, well, what was where with this workforce and this economic development. This will make it very clear on the budget side. What we did to understand economic development, and then skill will have its own separate, its own board. And then we talked about the budget in terms of how the line items could work. And then we have the other thing is there's a long to-do list or activities list, all important issues. But I think when it gets to 32 items or whatever it was, what are the most important things? Or what are the 3 or 4 things that you as the board, and like Larry and members of the executive director, your staff, and your leadership and the county and the city working together, what are the 2 or 3 things that are really critical to get done? Yeah, how many businesses, what are your goals underneath business retention and expansion? What are your small business goals? You know, this has been a strange year. 2020 has been about as crazy a year as I've experienced in economic development in terms of the impact it's had on small business. Some of them bounced back, others haven't. They're holding on by their fingertips right now. We know a couple here in Stark County. Hopefully they can continue to hang on as things start to ramp up in 2021. But to help, you need a roadmap. I think a little more definitive roadmap and focus. And I think by allowing skill to play in its lane over here with workforce and do its job and training allows the foundation here to be in economic development, focusing on your core issues, focusing on some areas, placemaking, maybe housing as well, things that you don't have to be in the driver's seat, but you want to be supportive of as they may really impact economic development today as well as in the future. See what else we've, so on the strategic plan, it's important then to say, what are you going to try to get done this year? What are you trying to get done in the next 3 to 5 years? So again, you've got to kind of road map. I think you've done a great job on business retention and expansion. I think that continues, but what are the other pieces of the puzzle? Anything else on that?
Yeah, I guess a little more context that I would add. I know I talked about this in the literature review section, but Larry sent over all the items that the foundation wanted to accomplish in 2020 to 2021, and I think those are good, solid action items, but in our experiences working with economic development organizations and kind of looking at strategic plans, those are all rolled up under high-level economic development goals, and then there's some sub-objectives underneath that. And then within those sub-objectives would be the action items that Larry's pursuing and the foundation's pursuing. So kind of creating that organization, just kind of keep the blinders on, help improve focus. But really I think that's the best practice for economic development organizations would be to put together a 5-year strategic plan or whatever period of time that the foundation kind of makes best.
Again, most of the pieces that are there, it's just kind of getting them into the workflow, getting them together, figuring out what's now, what are the objectives underneath those. That's it.
That's it. So yeah.
That was right. So we're happy to take questions. You know, we will send this PowerPoint out to Larry to make sure you all get it. We'll put it with the county folks too, so that it can be shared. And right now, this is very much a draft. And again, these are recommendations. These are food for thought, things that we think may help strengthen the foundation moving forward. This is a tough time. I just talked to economic development director, and he's had to let go of the staff because a big chunk of their change comes from county and local cities and towns, and this county somewhat similar to the foundation. So these are tough times. The local use of government are challenged, and that's going to put some pressure on the foundation, as you all know right now. So we're hoping some of these recommendations reflect adjusting a little bit, trimming the sails a little bit here and there to help you be sustainable and move forward in 2021. Even if Larry's got to retire at the end of the year, hopefully these will provide a game plan to move forward. And we're going to put together whatever feedback we get or questions you have tonight, or feedback you want to send us or send Larry and forward us. We're going to try to digest that and then kind of tweak some of these recommendations for you. We've got really good discussions with Larry and with Kathy and some leadership on the steering committee as well on the recommendations that thank you, at least at this point. Anything else? Oh, in terms of the next step, then, if we could get whatever comments and thoughts you have, if we missed something, do we think about this? Feel free to, it's not done until it's done in the next few weeks, but get those questions or comments to us. We're going to try to put together kind of a work plan for you. Just some, again, this is food for thought. Some thinking and some timing around some of these ideas. The timing it would take to do any kind of change in bylaws or incorporation to the board. What's that look like? That doesn't get done in a week. So what's a reasonable time frame to think about it? That's something we want to focus on. And we'll get that done probably in this next month, definitely.
Yeah, I'd say about 2 weeks.
2 weeks or so.
Yeah, I think that we'd like, if everybody is open to it, but, creating some time for discussion now on
Yeah.
what we've put together. If there's questions there, feedback, if you think we're totally off base and want to tell us, whatever it is, but this is kind of, I think it'd be valuable to have a little bit of discussion on this material.
We have a question back or comment?
So, in my understanding, skill is a very unique set that most don't operate under this way. But as a school superintendent, it is very valuable to our students.
Yeah.
Creating that workforce. What issues do you see with separating into two separate entities instead of keeping it together like you did?
Well, I think it's very hard in terms of the focus sometimes. The focus in the economic development, at least as we understood it, can kind of feel like it's a lot of workforce the development side. And maybe some other things that weren't addressed as they should be, because you're going to be pushing a lot of effort that direction. And it also allows, I think, for the budget and the focus to be on skill when it needs to be on skill. They have two separate boards. You've got the foundation board and the skill board. Let the skill board work and operate and function. And there should be collaboration, don't get me wrong, there definitely should be collaboration. But it's a pretty big lift for a smaller county to have such a unique program within it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have that, you should. The schools have been very critical in a partnership with skill. So we want to emphasize the importance of it, but they probably need, I think we're suggesting you should try playing it online. Definitely collaboration, working with industry, making sure the linkages are there, then with the training, with the schools, that kind of thing, but guiding that through skill instead of right through the foundation. That, just for clarity, I think, for a large extent.
To follow up on Kevin's question is, the question is, where is the funding coming from for skill? We have a comprehensive plan, obviously, how to go forward, it's more like an issue. But if the money ain't coming, then we can't do anything. And we have a lot of ideas that should be implemented in the workforce development area. And we also need a new campus building, which is an enormous amount of money. If we can get the land, it's okay, but otherwise we can't materialize it. So what's your experience from how these, how the skill identity is financed?
We've been, our firm does a little bit of work with community colleges and training innovation centers, where, again, it's not really representing economic development organizations, but it's very, very important to economic development, that the functionality of it. There's probably some resources available in, if there needs to be a physical building, then in terms of support, I think where that gets located is probably pretty important within the county. So there are resources available for kind of some of these physical assets. The key is going to be the operational side to make sure it can function at the level that you want it to function at.
You know, the complication is that skill serves several counties and schools, for example, plus the adults in various cities located out of some counties. So the financing is really all the burden of the Southern County has been the burden of Southern County.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of outside incomes that should really be participating. I don't know, again, I had all that.
Yeah, we're not there to say we've got a solution yet in terms of how they would be separated, to make sure the functionality, we want the functionality to continue. That's definitely important.
Yeah, so just to kind of, key on the two comments that were just made, because I think really one of the key takeaway messages here is, sort of a, separation of the skill and economic development foundation. But in other counties that you've worked with or, that you've been involved with in the past, I mean, obviously one of the questions here is the county has had a very collateral involvement in the past. But other counties, may have, a contrasting way to look at that. And since we have people here from the school, I mean, do you see that the school system plays a more active role financially, workforce development is more involved. I mean, I think that if I'm seeing what you're showing here, that it's been kind of a unique thing for the county to be, and the Economic Development Foundation to be so involved in a workforce development effort. What do other counties do?
Schools sometimes play a key role, I think tech plays a key role. Sometimes industry steps up and plays a key role.
Other butts.
What I guess I can do is I can try to get some information back from some of our folks on our workforce side of our office, and provide you some models.
And I think that was all valid.
It's all the challenge that we're thinking about.
We, as county government, we were kind of unique that, you know, we were more collateral involved in the school, and I mean, that's kind of what got us to the stage, but on the same token, obviously, it's a very valuable entity for our county, but, you know, maybe we're not looking in the right areas, you know, on how to fund it. And obviously, also, the federal government has spoken a lot about putting funding into that type of, you know, occupation. I'm assuming that's gonna come through the school pathway and not through county government, so. maybe-
Or both.
Or both, I mean, it really is collaborative.
I haven't seen it yet, I've been involved in county government.
Let me say something.
Yeah.
The schools actually put a lot of money into skill through the tuition that they pay for each student. And in our case here with skill, the schools put in over 4 times as much money into skill as what the county does. The county is just kind of like to get us over the hump. The schools carry the load on skill, and then we get a lot of money for equipment that comes through the co-op. They get Perkins money, federal money to pay for that equipment. So there's a lot of money coming in from there, and every year that's up or down. But each year, the amount the school puts in is over 5 times as much as what the county has put in the past. This year, they didn't put anything in.
And that's tied to students directly. All related to school.
One thing I recall, Jim Pressel, who is our state representative, was at one of our meetings when I think Larry was there, and there was a conversation about the amount of money that schools pay per student. And he stopped, I wish Brad was here. Brad Hazelton said that the state pays the schools more than the schools are paying skill. I think it was like $500 per student more. They were retaining it, the schools kept $500. And when we calculated it up, that would have been $80,000 that we had been getting per student.
The thing is, those students,
Go back now.
those students spend a half a day at skill, they spend the other half a day at the school. Man, we're fortunate they only keep $500.
Go back.
Yeah.
I'm, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Albert Hanson, I'm the area CTE director. I support schools in 4 different counties, including Stark County, a number of students come from Stark County and other counties, which has been an issue for people. It's called an additional pupil count that the state of Indiana puts together through the governor's workforce cabinet that funds CTE programs. That is based on whether the course that we're teaching, the amount that the state reimburses us is based upon it's a high wage and a high demand job. And they have a formula for that and how much is reimbursed. And that's continuing to change with the new programs and studies that's coming out and graduation pathways. But in every case, for the funding that we get, the additional pupil count for CTE is less than I am charging for tuition to the school to send students to the program. So each school pays tuition to send a student to any program, including skill, and what they get reimbursed is less. So the school then pays that additional amount to send that student to a program.
I guess what we should say is that, you know, the issue of the county's involvement has been and what level the county should be supporting that program. And let me backtrack and say, the county believes that skill is a good program. We have no qualms about the quality of the programming, you know, the students that are being produced, and the value that it lends. It's always an issue of payment. Who's who, and what do they look at to try to subsidize, you know, other outside counties. So those are the major things, and I think their board needs to sit down they need to understand that funding, because every time we ask, we get a little bit different answer. And it never, you know, it's a little bit different. I don't think their board even understands the funding necessarily. But beyond that, we need to sit down as a group with the schools, with the employers, with people from the county maybe, and talk about where their funding gaps are and what resources are out there to be able to help them through that, rather than it's the county's responsibility. Because we're getting less money all the time too. And we fund that off of our income tax. Well, with the COVID, we're going to get a lot less money, and we're going to be forced to try to fund the same level of things that we've been doing with a lot less money. So if we have to do it with a lot less money, I mean, that means it's going to trickle right down to the other folks. So it's a problem.
And just to rebut that, or add on that too, I think really the moral of the story that came out of your presentation was that functionally though, the reason why there's sort of a deficit on the economic development side is that it's overwhelming for the Economic Development Foundation to be so involved with managing skill that if they were separate. Maybe that's it, because then they look for their own funding.
Right, I think.
And they have, and I think I believe too, you said that in your presentation, that if they were separate, that the resources for funding might be greater.
Yeah.
For the different avenues that they can seek that. And then obviously on the economic development side, they can focus more on bringing industry in, supporting our, the other things that you put there that seem to be that.
Again, the entities would be working closely together, without question. But it would be, that way you can focus on the resource side, training side, make sure they align with the training needs, the industrial economic development needs of existing industries and new industries coming in. And then now, the economic development side, we have good resources too, that are kind of unique, not focused on the workforce, other than their indirect ways of economic development. So,
Well, I think another important thing, that I think this needs to be stated, Mr. Hanselman has 10 schools in 4 or 5 different counties. And Stark County government is the only county government that provides any sort of funding. St. Joe County doesn't, Marshall County government does not, Fulton County does not. We view that as a problem, that we're the poorest of the group, and we're the only one providing funding.
And the caveat to that would be, because skill is such a great resource. I mean, Marshall County has LLN, it isn't has the great leadership and programming for Marshall County. It's done through hours work with purpose, basically, is how it's done through, and that is shared between both sides. Fulton County, which I'm in Fort County, that's why I can kind of speak for them. They send their kids to Logan for all that stuff instead of coming this direction. But if we had more students that were coming out of those counties to help and start to support that, it would give you more funding to run those programs. But without those programs, your workforce would be very harmed.
One advantage to having skill in Stark County is the localness of it. The local students, the local adults have a much better chance to attend those classes. If skill starts to falter and the training classes go to Plymouth, we won't have near as many students from our communities. And that was the core reason why the county initially supported skill. At that time, it was predominantly for workforce training. It was so we have training here rather than we get the workers have to go to Balfour, South Bend to get the training. And then the same thing applies to the schools. When we started working with the schools, we get a lot larger response from the local schools than we do from the far out ones. If we don't have that training here, if it goes to Plymouth or to Valpo, our students and those numbers are not going to go there. And back to one of Karen's points before, it's important to have those kind of trainings for these graduation pathways that the state requires now, and that's a great service that Skill offers to schools to have that right here in these communities.
yeah, thank you. Don't do away with what you're saying. You separate lanes with coordinated.
Yeah, I feel like we're putting skill on trial here. That's
Yeah,
not the goal of the county. I think, just looking at your goal of it is that everybody agrees that But I mean, I think even through your own findings that you're saying that it makes sense to have a separate entity. So one entity can focus primarily on economic development. The other one can focus primarily on workforce development. But then they're side by side, and their mission.
Yes.
They have a very parallel mission, let's just say.
Very much so. Two different lanes, if you will. Other questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
This is unrelated, so if anybody else wants to add something about that, they can, but, just as far as housing goes, the Constellation of Stars did participate in the Indiana Bond Bank's, Flipping Finance Challenge at the end of February, and we got a proposal about like, industry collaborating with the county for like a housing development, and, I mean, it was all just theoretical and stuff, but, as far as the results from that, we can get that to you so you can incorporate it into the.
Yeah, that would be great. Right now,
That was participated in that, and we had a good discussion about that. In fact, I've had a couple of different industry people talk to me about the need for housing, their willingness to participate, so I view that as a potential way to work on that.
yeah, I'm working right now with the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority in Pasco County on this workforce, kind of a pilot program where they're $30 million. That is the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority is providing $1 million for the pilot program for workforce housing in Pasco County. Kind of a piece of financial package, if you will, to make sure that the housing is quality, but it's also in an affordable range for workforce.
Part of that is also, when it comes to doing the housing, is finding our niche, and then to draw talent in order to fulfill that niche. What niche do you think best for you to create and start, like, we're known for this niche? What is that prescription, do you think? I know you listed all those things that currently exist. Is there one of those that stand out higher than the others, or is there something else we should be going for that isn't currently here?
Well, I can start, Matt, and then you can probably add to this. I think two things, and I think one is really an opportunity and another is a really strong asset, but the lakes are huge. I think that's a huge asset, in addition to just the recreation opportunities that they provide. But that's something to build on. I think housing could play into that as well. But definitely build off of that, some of the more rural characteristics of the county, and what that could do for tourism. But then an opportunity that I see is you have these unique downtowns, small town downtowns. There's probably some redevelopment that needs to go into those, some focus, and quite a bit of placemaking efforts. But the bones are there. I think we saw that just driving around today. So if you can really focus your efforts on that small town placemaking, revitalizing downtown, I think that would really add a quality of place effort so you can get people living in downtown, make those vibrant places.
I think there are two other things, and not maybe specific to a specific industry application, but first and foremost, for young families, schools are number one. So if you're the most important person for young families, bar none. If your public schools can't keep up with public schools in LaPorte County or St. Joe County or Marshall, so I mean, I want to say, I think skill's a good thing, it's a great asset to have, but the schools are critical. The other key component, and, you know, Larry, I'm sure we talked about this, but right now I'm going on broadband capacity volume is absolutely, I don't know to tell the schools that, or anybody probably saying, after what we've been going through, but it's absolutely critical in a more rural county like Stark County. Heck, even in Indianapolis, there are pockets of students that can't get on the internet. So it's something even bigger, and there's a struggle with in certain neighborhoods. But in rural areas, it's a challenge to the distance that we have from towers and so on. But that's really critical. Yeah.
Let's have a segue into this, kind of interesting. The age differential here in the county, 47% versus 24%. Can you elaborate on that and kind of maybe break that down a little bit? Are people leaving after age 24 or 25 and never coming back?
I don't know.
I mean, the older people, as me, as I am, you know, but anyway, can you elaborate on that maybe a little bit?
Yeah, we didn't do it, comp, did we? So I think the responses, your age group 34 and below, or under 35, are probably lower as a share of the population than other metropolitan, or other counties generally. So it does show a bit of an aging, and the question, and we didn't get into this level of analysis of what you're asking, but I think
Okay.
it's a relevant question. Well, have they not, if there were housing opportunities, and then employment opportunities too, I don't know.
Okay.
But could they have stayed in Stark County? A lot of people right now, I do a lot of work in, not just economic development, but also housing development that affects workforce. And we're seeing some trends, again, how will these be lasting trends? But the idea that you could come to a place, raise your family in a safe, rural community that has all the broadband capacity, good schools, and it's, you're within a 45-minute drive of your work, that's within Stark County, you prefer probably, but it could be in St. Joe or Marshall or LaPorte. But you want to keep those families here. So, yeah, I didn't get into reading that level.
Yeah, we need to strive for that, right? I mean, you
So
know what
I
I'm
think
saying?
there's probably some of that, loss that has occurred across much of the Midwest. I mean, it's not unique to Stark County, but it can become a drain on the county economically.
One of your bullets did address brain drain, though. I mean, you mentioned it just for a second.
Yeah.
One of your bullets did address that specifically, and I think we do have some concerns about that.
Yeah.
Not just skill trainings, but just, people that get a college education or get to high school and say, heck, I'm leaving, I want to get trained somewhere else, I'm going to stay there, I'm not coming back. And so, we worry about that.
I will just say that I was raised here, born and raised here, went to high school here. I lived in Fort Wayne, I loved it there. I moved to Bloomington, I loved it here. When it was time to raise my kids, came back.
Yeah,
So
and
I think before that happens.
I think so too, so, again, we didn't get into detailed analysis of it, but it's a legitimate point to ask. You want to retain that talent and you grow your own economic base. That's why I'm so happy to see some of the small business stuff that the foundation's been doing. And we want to certainly help promote that in more as possible.
And some themes that we talked about in terms of having the housing that's attractive to younger people and good broadband access are things that economic development can be focused on to address some of the brain drain challenges that aren't unique just to Stark County, but really rural communities all over the Midwest.
Where's your best microbrewery?
In
I have a microbrewery.
Just 56.
These are on Colorado traffic placemaking.
Well, there's a couple of
But
strategies.
those are all sort of, we laugh about that, but those things are actually real in terms of amenities and quality of life. They are sort of considered soft side, but they're the real side of life. That place you go to with your family or your friends or colleagues.
Well, and just going back to kind of your focus though on the question on, well, what would Stark County, like, what should we be looking for? Really, it sounds like you're focusing on our assets, our lakes, parks, things like that. Things that we can do entertainment-wise, focusing on downtowns. I mean, we really didn't talk industry-wise. We're not against people wanting to just live here.
Yeah.
I think we need a tax base from that too. I mean, it's to be able to survive, though, we have to have income that's generated. So they have to do at least one or the other.
Right, so we do have targeted industry, some of those align with the previous study from years ago. I think there's areas that we talked about, Larry, you're real close on a few things right now. Again, folks knocking on the door. Oh, is it the one up here in Knox, right? Is it Knox or Hamline?
Talking about the beverage packaging is one to come.
Yeah.
They plan still to come next year. And then we have, at least one of the industries is looking at some expansions here in the near future again. We had two that just completed expansions and one of them wants to do a further expansion. So, and then it isn't jobs, but the solar interest, it's throughout Indiana, but pretty strong right here in Stark County. That's an investment that helps kind of spread the tax load out, So So, yeah, we have a few things that are happening there right now.
One other thing that I'll mention, and this trend was already starting pre-COVID, but I think COVID has really accelerated it, and it's the ability for people to work remotely. So now we're seeing really opportunities for people to live where they want to live, and that could be here in Stark County. But if you had the broadband infrastructure in place, they could do a job that's in California, be connected. And we've actually seen that in Hancock County, Indiana. They have a really unique organization, utility provider that's done a great job with broadband connectivity. And they have folks, specifically one of their customers, and they actually use this in the marketing campaign. They came from Silicon Valley, loved the rural atmosphere of Hancock County, and couldn't believe that they could get better broadband through this provider in Hancock County, Indiana, than they could in Silicon Valley, California. And so they permanently lived and raised their family in Hancock County, but they do their work for California-based companies.
I'd like to say, as far as broadband, we had a study, and we had a grant to do a study, but then maybe more importantly than that, we have a local utility, a rural electric company that is going to run trunk lines. And then they will they'll have a contract with companies that will put towers off of that. So we've got an opportunity coming up in the next few years to send broadband out throughout the county. Now, whether that will match up specifically with where our weakest spots are, I don't know. And it's something I don't know, but that is something that I'm very encouraged about. We're going to have great opportunity to expand the broadband throughout the county with that local rural
There's, I would say this, if you do have an election next week, but no matter who wins next week, broadband infrastructure is at the top of the priority list for government. And that's been, it's there now. So as those opportunities, we, what was it, $500,000 grant?
Yeah,
There is a $500,000 grant over there. $800 grant for Henry County?
Yep.
Henry County, working with an REMC to help them extend and expand the broadband. So there are resources out there. And sometimes more critical thing too. But again, it doesn't mean that you write the grant, but you're partnering with that team out there that table.
I just think Dave is looking over and see, will make any comments about your efforts there?
Yeah, so we've actually have a product being started to be delivered next week. We're tying all of our substations together, bringing it back to the office with the infrastructure. And then, as Larry said, we've talked to a few different internet providers from there that could tap in. We're putting a big enough line in, far bigger than we need to do our loop, that they'll be able to tap into and go from there. Now, again, whether they do or not, I don't know. It sounds to me very promising that the few that they've met with, that they're very interested. I mean, we're kind of doing the hard work. We really, when we first started, we thought, boy, that'd be great if we could bring internet to everybody, just as we did electric. But it was just far bigger numbers than our board wanted to buy. So, yeah, it's probably about a 2-year project for us, but the product's starting to come in now, so it's going to happen. And where it goes from there, I really don't know.
Any other comments? We will have this out ready to you tomorrow to the county, so you can make sure you distribute it. Any comments? We've gotten a few comments back from the steering committee.
Have you asked for people to send comments to you, or?
Yeah, or send it to you and you pass it, whatever. I mean, it's probably easier than after.
Yeah.
Card. Send it to Larry and pass it on to us. Okay. Look at, he's not here tonight. Who else? Oh, Brandon?
Then you send it to me, you're right.
Yep.
Then you send it to me.
Yeah, so, but yeah, as you go through it and take notes on it, because that's going to be really the working document with the implementation, kind of a game plan for how to work through some of these recommendations, then coming up in the next month after we get your feedback. So we'll stick around. Thank you. I want to respect your time, so those who want to stick around and ask any questions, I'll mask up and be happy to talk one-on-one for a little bit. But I want to respect anybody else who's get going. And thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. You've been some really good things. Stark County's I always say that the mint capital of the world, right?
Still is.
Still living up to 1990. I
We have a
still
processing, we have a processing facility in Hamline. What's interesting
We
is
gotta
they
get it here.
they get some of
still
their
sell
oil
some
from
hinges
India.
on that.
That's right, they do a bunch of all the work. So thank you very much, and we'll be happy to.
Thank you.